Good morning, MAB Elementary, and this will be third year math, and we're working on decimal fractions. So get out your paper and your pencil, bring your thinking math side of your brain to the table, and let's go to work. We've done a lot of work on decimal fractions, and I think you guys now understand the place values involved and how we record those numbers and how we read those numbers. And so just for example, let's look at this number. Hold on, my green pencil has run out of ink. I need a new one. So, 3 and 64 hundredths. Below that, 5 and 4 tenths. Six and 9 hundredths. Just to remind you what our decimal place values look like, because I know you've had probably at least a week since you've looked at decimal fractions. So, but we want to take you now to using decimal fractions. So far, we've been understanding how you read, write, and understand the value, the quantity in decimal fractions. Well, numbers are to be used. Numbers are to be used for computation. Numbers have functions that we can do with them. And when we're working with whole numbers, we can add them up. 3 units plus 4 units, 7 units. We can subtract them. 25 take away 12 equals 13. The difference between 25 and 12 is 13. Well, since decimal fractions are numbers, we must be able to do functions with them, addition, subtraction, whatever. So let's start with addition of decimal fractions. So let's go back. So if I have 5 tenths plus 4 tenths in number fractions, we know how to do that. We've got a common denominator, so we can add them. And the answer is going to be something in tenths, isn't it? 5 is the numerator plus 4 in the numerator. So the answer here is 9 tenths. 9 tenths. Is that exactly the same thing as this? Five tenths plus 4 tenths equals 9 tenths. I want to remind you, an equation set up this way, that's what an equation is. An equation is a series of numbers that gives you a function to do with them. In this case, it's an addition function. 5 tenths plus 4 tenths equals 9 tenths. Now that is going way back, you remember, that's a horizontal number sentence. A horizontal number sentence. It goes across the horizon this way. It happens that with decimal fractions, or any number with decimal fractions in it, that it gets really hard when the numbers get smaller, the fractions get longer. It gets really hard to do these functions unless you do them vertically. So whenever you see a horizontal equation with fractions in it, you need to make it vertical and solve it. So this number sentence equation is a lot easier done if you take 5 tenths and you add to it 4 tenths and you draw an equals line. See what I did? Tenths in tenths place. Decimal on top of decimal, that's always going to be important. when you're doing numbers with decimals in it. And I don't have any whole numbers here. So I add up the tenths, 5 tenths and 4 tenths, and just like before, I get 9 tenths. And that decimal point that separates whole numbers from decimal fractions has to be right in line. And there's no holes. So in the worksheet I'm going to give you, and by the way, I should have told you, this is Introduction to Decimal Fractions 12. When you see the works on here, there's some practice works where you have to use the number fractions and see what their equivalent is in decimal fractions. You do those first, and then when you come down to the works at the bottom, you're going to see horizontal equations of decimal numbers, and you need to write them down on your paper and solve them vertically. When you're doing decimal fraction numbers, always vertically. So I'll just give you the first one. 6 and 27th hundredths plus 3 and 90 hundredths. Seven hundredths and 0 hundredths, 7 hundredths. 2 tenths and 9 tenths, whoops, 11 tenths. 11 tenths, 10 tenths is 1 whole, so I got 11 tenths, so that's 1 in the tenths place, and that 1 whole has to be exchanged. 10 tenths exchanged for 1 whole. I just exchanged it, put my notation up there so I remember where it is. And now I'm going to add up the whole numbers. 6 wholes and 3 wholes is 9 wholes, and I had 1 whole at the top that I exchanged. So I've got 10 wholes. So 6 and 27th hundredths plus 3 and 90 hundredths equals 10 and 17 hundredths. Addition with decimal fraction. Let me do one more for you. 6 and 41 hundredths plus 7 and 37 hundredths, and there's my equals line. Vertical. On the worksheet, it's a horizontal number sentence. Make it vertical. 1 tenth and 7 tenths, 8 tenths. 8 hundredths, excuse my misspeaking. 1 hundredth and 7 hundredths is 8 hundredths. 4 tenths and 3 tenths is 7 tenths. And see that decimal? Always in line. Decimal comes right there. 6 wholes and 7 wholes is 13 wholes. So that's 3 in the unit place. Simple family, whole numbers, unit place. 3, 13 units, and that 110 comes straight down there. So 6 and 41 hundredths plus 7 and 37 hundredths equals 13 and 78 hundredths. Decimal fractions. Adding them. Mr. T, math. Make those brains strong. See ya.